So today we're going to talk about spaces. Ron, if you wouldn't mind muting yourself, please.
Sure.
Thank you. Oh, hi, John from Albuquerque. Nice. Welcome. So let me share my screen. All right. Hopefully everybody can see that. So I pulled in a project here that we can kind of experiment with for a couple of reasons. One, it's commercial. Secondly, it's got some little things about it that make it really useful for spaces that allow us to see what spaces can do. But it also has the file has a couple of peculiarities with the way that I constructed it that kind of run counter to spaces. So, you know me, always like to break a tool in our meetings. I'm going to go ahead and start a new file here. And I think I may need to share that as well. Yeah. So I'll hold down the Shift key. All right, can you guys see that blank file? Okay, great. So you'll see that there is a space planning menu here in Architect and Designer. And you've got adjacency matrices and stacking diagrams. But the tool that we're going to focus on today is the space tool. And it has its origins in the GSA, among other things, the Government Service Agency, which is the largest landlord in the US. It owns all these government buildings that get rented out to government agencies. So that's one of the motivations for the origins of tools like the space tool, is to have a kind of a facilities management kind of container built into your CAD or BIM software. But it also has some real usefulness in terms of energy modeling and to a certain degree occupancy, interior finish schedules, does a lot of different things. I think many people who use the space tool just use it to label rooms. And that's okay too, but probably data tags is a better way to do that if that's all you want. So there's a couple of ways to develop a space, right? One is that you can just use the rectangle mode or the polygon mode. So just at its simplest, I'll just draw a rectangle here. We're at 1/4 inch scale. And you can see that when I draw the rectangle, it automatically gives me a net area and also a gross area, because I'm just drawing an abstract polygon or rectangle here. Net and gross are the same. They would be different if I specified that my space was to, say, extend from the center line of a wall to the center line of the wall. That would give me the gross area. And then inside face of wall to inside face of wall would give me the net area. So that's why there are those differentiations there. Now, I'm going to go ahead and go to my layers here. This is design layer 1. And I'm just going to set the wall height to, something fairly innocuous, 9 feet. And then if I look at my object info palette, right, here's my space. And there are a lot of settings with this object, which I'm not possibly going to get to all of them, but let me clue you in on a couple right here. So first of all, I can define the space as either a 2D only object. So here it is, it's only 2D. Or if I click on this show 3D, then it will generate a 3D object for the space. And by default, my space object is going to have a bottom boundary equal to the layer elevation and the top boundary equal to the layer elevation, which is to say it has a height of 0. So I can give it an offset, right? I can define a certain height by just manually typing that in, right? And in this case, that's the net, and I'm displaying gross in 3D. So if I should flip over to net, then there it is, it's 10 feet tall, right? If let me go back to gross here. I can also, instead of the layer, manually assigning a height, I can assign it to the layer wall height, and that might make a little more sense. I'll do that for both the net and the gross. So I've got a net boundary and a gross boundary. So if I'm using stories, which we'll look at in a little bit, then I might define the net volume of that space object as extending all the way up to, say, a ceiling height. But perhaps I've got a commercial space and I've got a mechanical plenum above the ceiling to the underside of the roof deck. And so if I've set up my stories that way, then I could set the gross height equal to the extend all the way to the underside of the roof deck, and the net height could be to the underside of the ceiling, for example. You know, that's just a very absolute surface there of what this space object means. So I'll loop back and get a little bit more into it. The other, so that's one way of drawing a space object, is to just draw directly, draw the space object directly with the tool, either as a rectangle, right, or some sort of polygon. There's my little bow tie. And I can, let's see if I can pick up attributes here. Nope. So obviously it's going to be sort of a bit of a hassle if I constantly have to, every time I draw a space object, manually change it equal to the layer wall height, right? So fortunately, this is an object like a door or a window or a wall that can be styled. And so once if I go through and I set up all the parameters of my space object the way that I like, I can go ahead and create a style out of it. So I'll go ahead and create this one. And I'll just call this space style 1. Okay. And so now let's go ahead and go to a 3D view. This is an unstyled space object. Here's the styled. This one has space style 1 assigned to it. So I'm going to go ahead and assign space style 1 to this. And you can see that because in the style, I've defined the space object as automatically displaying 3D attributes, and for the height to be equal to the layer elevation, then that and any subsequent space objects that I draw are going to follow those rules. Once I have a style, then of course, like any other style, I can go ahead from the object info palette. In the instance of the style, I can edit it, right? Or I can, from the resource manager, let's go to all resources. It's a red letter. From the resource manager, I can just right click on that and edit that style. So either way. So I can change the way that it's numbered. I can edit the layout. So here's all my fonts, right? And however I want to lay it out, I'll just make a real simple little font change here. just to demonstrate how this works, right? So now in 2D, you can see that my space objects now have the graphic characteristics that's shown. And you can also see now that I've got a style assigned to this, and this is how styles just work in Vectorworks, whether it's space or doors or whatnot, that any settings that are defined in the style and not defined on an individual instance of the style are going to be grayed out. So as is often the case, after I create a style, I find that there's a bunch of settings that became sort of built into the style that I actually want to be able to edit on an instance by instance basis. So I often find myself when initially creating a style that I'll go back and edit the style and see wherever I've got one of these little curved arrow icons, just like with door styles and window styles and so forth. That means that all of that is going to be defined by the style, but I can change all of that to be the little, by clicking on it, I can get the little sliders here. And so now all of these become editable on an instance by instance basis, right? So there may be some things that I don't want to be editable, like boundaries and areas, the space label, right? I might want that to be absolutely consistent from space to space. But things like room finishes, right? Different rooms are going to have different finishes. So I probably want to make that editable. I'll get to more of that later. And then, you know, we can really get into all sorts of information that can be attached to that space object. Really gets quite detailed in terms of energy use and you know, illumination and light switches and smoke detectors and all of that. So I can either make these individually editable, right? Or I can make them all editable just by clicking all by style or all not editable. I'm just going to pick a couple. I don't even know if we're going to get to these. And then again, if I want to use the space object for energy analysis, then I'm probably going to want to make all of this editable for the Energos tools in Vectorworks. And then I've got some advanced settings that have to do with occupancy and so forth that, again, I can make editable or not. So there's a whole lot to this tool. So some of this, a lot of the space object functions or functionality or features have to do either with documentation or with operations, so occupancy. But it can also be a useful tool just for massing, right? So for example, typically I find myself when I'm working in very early in a project, right? I might start laying out some rectangles and creating some spaces. All right, so here's a rectangle for a room, and then I might play around with that and reshape that room, and I'll make that 18 feet, whatever. Okay, so there we go. I've got a couple of rectangles. That's my bubble diagram in SD. Obviously, I'll probably have more than just two. In fact, let's go ahead and make it interesting. And I did not test this, so we'll see if this works. I'm going to convert this to a polygon and then change that to a radius corner. All right. So, so a couple of things. I could just keep doing this with polygons or surfaces or whatever. But I can also, from the AEC menu in Architect or Designer, I can create objects from shapes, and the list of shapes that you have available depends on what version of Vectorworks you have installed, whether it's Fundamentals or Architect or Landmark or Spotlight or Designer, whatever. So you can see that space is one of the options here. I'll go ahead and delete the source shapes. And so it's gone ahead and it's created all of these what were rectangles as space objects. And they're all, unstyled. So I'll go ahead and put them in by space style 1. There we go. So now, instead of just working as a little rectangle, right? I've got some the beginnings of a massing model. And under the space planning menu, so I think that's under AEC space planning. Right? I also have create walls from spaces. So that's kind of cool. So I'll go ahead and I can create the walls from all spaces that are in a given layer, or just the walls that are from a selected space only. In this case, it's the same thing. And I can place the exterior wall to align say the inner side to the space edge. So these are net spaces. And I can go ahead and choose a wall style. There's a whole slew of them. I'm not too picky for this demonstration, so just whatever. We'll do a CMU plane. And I'll combine collinear interior walls, right? And for the interior wall, I'll just do a generic interior partition wall, 4 inches. Okay, there we go. And so there you go. So Vectorworks has gone ahead and it was perfectly happy with the curve of this wall, right? And it has gone ahead and traced the exterior of those spaces with walls. And these walls built into the wall style, there's a certain default heights. So if I'm not happy with that, then probably what I need to do is edit that style. So for the insertion options, I'm just going to make the height not 4 feet, but I'll just make it the layer wall height, for example, since I haven't set up a story. And I'll go ahead and replace all those heights. All right, there we go. And then these two are defaulted at 10 feet. So I'll edit that style. And obviously, you don't have to use the sort of the styles that Vectorworks ships. You can use your own styles. So again, to insertion options, instead of layer elevation, I'll make the height the layer wall height. Great. So now those are all the right height. I'll just delete these so you can see how that. Now, if because I've just butted my spaces right up against each other and I haven't in my layout accounted for wall thickness, right? This interior wall is a little odd. Clearly, I need to be more thoughtful about how I place my walls. So let's see what happens if I go ahead and stretch this wall. All right, so the wall didn't really do anything there to the spaces. So I'm just gonna, now that I've got these walls, I'm gonna delete the spaces. And let me go ahead and create some new spaces. Only this time, instead of drawing them with the polygon tool, I'm going to use the inner boundary mode, the paint bucket over here. And so I'll just click here and here and here. And so now it's gone ahead and created these spaces. Again, if I move the wall, nothing happens. Right. So one way is to start with your spaces and generate your walls from the spaces. The other thing you can do is you can take your walls and generate spaces from walls. So I'm going to do a little bit of cleaning up here. I'm going to go ahead and move this wall to snap to that interior wall. Wonder why it doesn't want to. That's not nice. There we go. Those are 4-inch walls, and so we just went to the center line. So I've adjusted my footprint here. So the other thing I can do to create a space is I can pick some walls. Okay, that's nice. I can pick some walls here. So I'll just pick these walls and hit the checkbox, and it's giving me a space. And now I'll pick these walls, and it's giving me a space. And I'm just going through and picking all these walls, and I get a space. So the nice thing about doing it this way, hang on.
Getting an echo. Tina, are you on mute?
I'm on mute.
No, you're not.
Okay. All right, so the nice thing about doing it this way by selecting walls is now that space is bounded by the walls themselves. So if I take this wall and I move it down, say 24 inches, it didn't work. Dang it. All right, let's try that again. So interesting, I got a different gross floor area. I got to figure out why this is the case here. Let's go ahead and style these.
Maybe because your walls weren't joined.
My walls are joined though.
Not the interior wall.
Yeah, let's get you may be right about that. Let's give that a try.
Could it be the update boundary in the space area?
There we go. Thank you. Yeah, so normally I believe that that when you create a wall using the a space, excuse me, using the picked wall modes, it should automatically remember that, but I guess you need to pick the boundary here. And maybe that's because of how I've created the style. So next. Let's go ahead and edit that style and see if there isn't Hmm.
Francois,
Yeah,
is it because you got this not shown as editable? You got your little curvy arrow on your 2D boundaries and area.
yeah, that just indicates that the style is going to dictate those, and I can't change it in a particular instance, but that doesn't mean that the space isn't changeable for that value.
Okay, so
But I'll go ahead and try well, no, 2D boundary displays, that's net, that's good. I mean, we'll give it a try. You may be right, but I don't think so. No. Yep.
Can you move the wall and then update boundary?
Sure, I'll try that next. So I've just, yeah. See, yeah. Mhm. That's weird. Seems to have
Try,
broken it entirely.
try joining your interior wall to the outside wall and see if that works.
Yeah, I did. Or maybe I didn't.
Hmm.
Vexing. Okay, boundary type. Let's see. Oh, it's a wall. So let's go ahead and pick our boundary.
Well, it seems that the boundary of the space is taking precedent over the location of the walls because the wall snaps back to the boundary. Is there a way to reverse that?
Sorry, say again.
It seems that when you were trying to move the wall, it seemed to snap right back to the boundary of the space as if the space has predominance over the.
Oh, no, yeah, I was just undoing. So I just did a move and then I just did undo.
So if you move the wall and then hit update boundary, shouldn't it then expand to the wall?
Let's try it.
You try that one.
Yeah, because that's grayed out because it's now manual. So yeah, that seems odd. So if I pick the boundary, which it was doing a minute ago, at least I'd take the extra step of picking the boundary, but it was doing it. If I update the boundary, yeah, all right. Nope.
Weird.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and edit that style. Okay. So yeah, I wanted to do this automatically. Oh, interesting. So why, okay. So my wall should be, maybe that's the issue. No, these were joined. Let's join them again. So that's joined. Wow, that's very annoying. It should be moving. All right, well. Yeah, so I guess I've got to, yeah, so now I've got a gap in the wall, so that's not good. For some reason, these walls are not staying joined. And since I didn't make these wall styles, I can't really say why. But if I change that to auto boundary, there we go. So let's go back to our style and see if there's a way that we can go ahead and make that auto boundary. Doesn't seem to be a way of forcing that. All right, well, so I guess I'm gonna have to update that. It's gonna call for a script, or, you know, at least.
When you were using the space tool and changing the space, was there a selection palette or mode choice that you could have made on the mode bar?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, what if that affects it?
So when I create a space object, right, I can draw one by picking a closed set of walls, and I thought that that would make the space sticky to the walls, so that if I if I change the walls, the space would go with it. Or I could just use the inner boundary mode where it would just find the walls. Or I could do, you know, polygons. All right, well, so just to add some further complexity, let me go to another. Can you all see this more developed plan here? All right, so I've got some rooms here that weren't created with the benefit of spaces, and there are certain things that are, you know, fairly straightforward. So let's go ahead, and I can either use the inner boundary mode to drop a space in here, or I can pick some walls. And again, it's should be perfectly happy to pick up curved walls. So you're seeing a significant offset here from the wall because there are some additional components, trim and so forth, that are not, that are components of the wall. So for example, I typically include a base component for my wall styles. And so while that baseboard is only, you know, 3.5 to 5.5, whatever inches tall, Vectorworks reads it as a space component. So if I use this methodology in order to create space objects, I just need to be aware that you know, it's going to make the room seemingly, you know, 3/4 of an inch or an inch and a half smaller all the way around. So that's one thing to think about.
You change the lower boundary layer of the space to be, you know, 2 feet above the ground.
I'm sorry.
Change the lower boundary of the space when you're setting up the space type. Wasn't there a lower and upper boundary? Could you just give it an assignment of 12 inches above the floor?
Yeah, but then I'm going to get the wrong volume.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you're doing
Okay. If you're saying something, you're on mute. All right. So so again, I can either use this inner boundary mode, or I can pick walls. And that's fine. See, in this case, when I moved the wall, the space moved with it. That's what I was expecting. I'm not sure why that wasn't working on my previous test file. So that's great. In this case, this is an interior project, so it's a finish out of an existing shell. And so very cleverly, what I did was I modeled the shell in another file, and then that shell is referenced into this file as a design layer viewport. So in order for Vectorworks to read a wall, that wall has to be visible. It has to be at the same scale as your current layer. It has to be turned on. So I can go over here to my shell layer, right? And those walls are fully visible. I can change my layer visibility here to show snap, modify others. Right? I can go to my navigation palette and go to layers and make that shell visible. But even if I do that, it won't create a space object. Moreover, I can't pick any boundary walls because that wall isn't in the file, it's just referenced from another file. So if I try to pick it, nothing's going to happen. So just be aware that that's a limitation at space creation, that if I've got if I have walls that are referenced from another file, which that may be a very common workflow for you, or you may never do that, fine. Then you're going to have to manually trace your spaces with the polygon tool, or the polygon mode, right? So you can still do spaces. You can still do spaces, but you can't auto bound them to this referenced shell. Here's another example. I didn't pick this file deliberately to have characteristics that would hobble the tool. It just so happened. So in this little shower alcove, rather than make this wall sort of go around, there's a header above this. And so what I've done is I've simply put an opening in the wall. So if I go in 3D, you can see that wall actually extends up beyond. And the way that I achieve that is, rather than have a short piece of wall here as a header, I simply have that wall be full height, and then I just have an opening in it, right? And so now if I try to do a space here, right? Vectorworks is going to read that shower as a separate room, and there's this sort of virtual wall between them, which might be fine. That might be what I want. I may want the shower to be considered a separate room. But if I pick these boundaries, excuse me, if I start picking these walls, thinking innocently, hey, this will work. Let's treat that all as one room. There's a piece of wall here that I'm not seeing. So it's gonna treat that as just that shower space, not the whole one. So it's just a couple of things to be aware of. On the other hand, there's some kind of cool things that you can do with spaces.
That's what I have a question about the shower and the bathroom. Is there a way to join or link two spaces so that the area calculations consider both spaces together? Which we something.
Then it's one space, isn't it?
Well, in that bathroom, that's what I'm saying. You might want to see it that way as one space. If you say I need to include the shower, but the two separate.
Yeah. And then what I would do there, yeah, you're right. So there, what I would do is I might do it this way. Let's try, see if this works. Boom, boom. Now I'm going to use the reshape tool. Stretch this space over so they overlap. Yeah, they don't want to overlap. So what I might do there is simply draw a couple of rectangles, add the surface, and now create a space. All right, so, but that space is not bounded to the wall. So if I reshape it, it's not. And if I go back and try to auto bound it, see, it finds walls and it automatically shrinks itself to the wall there. So, so I can get these sort of spaces that span two actual rooms, but then I lose the auto bounding feature. So in these little operatories, I actually have quite a lot going on in the ceiling. So let me go ahead and create a space because I've got this linked wall here, so I can't pick walls. So I'll go ahead and create the space. Okay. And now here it is. Let me click cube this. So I got a lot going on in here. All right, so there's the space. And so let's go ahead and give that space. Let's go to my settings. Let's go to 3D boundaries, show 3D, right? And instead of layer elevation, I can make the top bound. So in this file, I do have a story set up. So I can make the top bound the ceiling. Right, that could be the height net, and the height gross could be bottom of structure, way above, right? So there we go. Let me adjust my clip cube. So right now we're seeing the gross volume of that space because that's how it's displaying in 3D. But if I show net, then it's going to go to the ceiling. But there's actually quite a bit going on in that ceiling, right? And so yeah, there's something going on in the ceiling. Maybe quite a bit is an overstatement. So one of the nice things about the AEC menu, and this is a big improvement in spaces in recent versions, is under my AEC menu, I can go to my space planning submenu, and then you can see that there is a fit top of space to objects. So it's kind of like the fit walls to objects, but this is specifically for spaces. So I can have the net boundary match the gross. I can differentiate those. So net, I'm going to have the top bound to constrain objects only, and I'm going to pick a layer. I have a ceiling layer with all my ceiling geometry, and I'm going to have it go to the bottom face of various roof slabs, right? And then for the gross, I'll just have a fixed height only, and I'll just keep it to the bottom of structure. That's the roof deck way above. And I could have a fixed height only, or if I had some actual roof geometry, I could go ahead and do that. But this is fine for gross. So when I do that, you can see that Vectorworks has sculpted that space object in order to match all of the geometry that is going on in that ceiling, even to the point of picking up some, recessed cans here, which is probably not what I really wanted, but close enough. So that's if I show the net on the object, and if I want to show gross, then it'll just go back to showing me the general height of the underside of the structure above. So that's kind of useful because there are some instances where you may want to use your space object in order to calculate the total volume of your building. So this is a nice way of doing it. And why would you want to do that? Well, if you're using Energos, all right, let's go to project settings here. Oh yes, I don't have a heliodon. Fine, we'll just add a heliodon, and we're not going to be too picky about the orientation, because right. So if I look at the building here, let's go to setup. We'll call this a single story. Well, it's not a restaurant. Yeah, it's far from a restaurant, but I'll go ahead and pick that because that's the closest on the menu, and then I would need to go and specify that. So you see that over here under the building tab in Energos, there's a value here for the total relevant floor area and the total volume. So it'll go ahead and it'll list all the spaces, and I can just check on the ones that I want to select. And you can see that it can automatically calculate my relevant floor area and my volume specifically. And that could make a difference in terms of my energy usage for some of my Energos calculations. So that's one reason to go ahead and have your spaces accurately reflect your volumes. Now, is it the end of the world if you just pick some sort of average height? No, but in cases where you want to be more precise with your calculations, it might be helpful. Oh, sorry. Make those walls gray. It might be helpful to have a more accurate calculation of the volumes of your spaces, either net or gross. And then, other than serving as just a volume that you can assign various values to, you can also use spaces to generate a finish schedule. I only have, a couple of spaces in here, but that'll be enough to sort of show how that works. So under tools, reports, I can create a report. And there's a whole bunch of pre-formatted reports, so I don't want to scroll, so I'll just type finish. And when I start typing F5, then I get a room finish schedule. And there it is. And let me go ahead and can everyone see that? Sometimes windows don't show properly. Can everybody see that room finish schedule?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, good. So there's my room finish schedule. I can recalculate that, nothing's happening. Well, that's probably because my spaces aren't set up properly. So let's go ahead and select these spaces, or I could just use my select similar. So there's my 4 space objects, right? So very important. If I want it to be on the room finish schedule, that space to populate it, I need to go ahead and click on that. When I do that, I get this room finishes pops up. And the spaces tool will only give me north, south, east, west. So if I've got some irregularly shaped room or some 5-sided room or whatever, no, this is not for you. There's a standard library of finishes that Vectorworks is shipping out of the box, right? And I can assign those individually, or I can edit finishes, and I can either create some new finishes, right? There's the library of default finishes. Right? I could create my own version of that. So I could create a new finish. And we'll call that AT2, and we'll give it a description. Painted.
First of all, is this just for inventory and cost, or does it actually create 3D models of these bases and ceilings in the model?
No, it doesn't create 3D models. This is just for a finish schedule. So, you know, you present a finish schedule to your contractor, right? All right, and then so for ceiling, I'm going to choose painted gypsum wallboard. Boom, there it is. Okay. So now that I've made these objects finish schedule enabled, right? These space objects. Now, if I recalculate the active worksheet, there it is. There are my spaces, right? And like any, let me go ahead and let's go to 2D display. I'll go ahead and create a style there. All right, I'll just pick one of them. All right, there it is, space style, edit the layout. And I wonder if this isn't a class issue. Yeah. So there we go. We'll just put all this in. All this is, those are all in the room number and room name class. Oh, that's fine. Perfectly happy with that. Okay, and I'll go ahead and since I didn't have those classes, I created this. There we go. All right. All right, so now we can see the numbering here. And so I'm a, yep. So I could create, you know, a room area class, for example, so I could turn that off or on, whichever. And of course, I can renumber these rooms. I don't think I can actually, because of how the style is set up, that these are the space number type is incremental, so I can go ahead and there we go. I need to manage the sequence there. So I can renumber all, fine. Yeah. There we go, now it's renumbered those. And of course, when I recalculate. So I should be able to insert a room name. So room number 1, we'll call it a consult. No, not bidirectional. All right, and so for need to edit the style, excuse me. Pick the wrong thing. So for occupancy, I don't want to make that by style. I want to make that editable. For numbering, that's all editable, and I'll just make it label text. All right, so there I can name that, I can number that 1, 2, 3, 4, or I can do it from the schedule. And in fact, I can go ahead and sort by ascending. There we go. And now it's sort of bidirectional. So I could make number 1 could become number 5, for example. Nope, still won't let me. I have to do it from over here. Let's see if I can assign a room name to this. So nope, I have to do it at the room name. And so I can define the occupant type, occupant name, proposed area, sort of all those sort of occupancy concerns. I can assign various zones to it, and so forth. But on the finished schedule, what it's going to show me is the floor material flooring, base, north, south, east, west of walls and ceilings. And of course, I don't have to show the full description there. I can just give it, I can have a legend with ceiling material, floor material, base material, and so forth.
Does the wall column take into consideration doors and windows and trim? If you need to put a different material paint on the exterior windows, for example?
No. Likewise, if you have a wainscoting, it doesn't automatically pick up wainscoting or anything like that. So it's pretty basic finish schedule. The way I would probably use it is, rather than give a detailed description of in the material type, I would probably just have a legend associated with it. So I would have, wall tile 1, wall tile 2, or I'm sorry, W1 for wall, W2, W3. And so W1 might be just painted gyp, right? W2 might be painted gyp with a certain finish, and then a different finish on trim, and so on and so forth. So, so it's, I would like to see an evolution to a finish schedule that reads the material off of the wall, so that you could go ahead and build your wall styles with trim, with wainscoting, with whatever tile, and that your finish schedule will be populated from that. But the way the Spaces tool works is it's you're assigning those general finishes to the surface of the space itself, in a sense. Oh, a couple of chat. All right. So if you're wanting to do occupancy calculations, right? You have different because your space object can be granular, it can be individual rooms, or it can be rather coarse. So you could have a space for your retail section of your retail floor, and then a different space for the stock room, right? Because there are different occupancy densities for those. Or you could go room by room and use it for either massing models or energos calculations, finish schedules. My strong suspicion, or my feeling, is that for any given project, you're probably not going to use every single feature of the space object. There'll be some projects where you're would tend to focus on say occupancy, others where you might focus on surface area versus volume, for example. Others where you would use it as the basis for your finish schedule. And I suppose it's conceivable that you would use all of those in any given project, but probably the project type is going to dictate how you use the tool, right? Oh, and then the last thing is, you may have noticed that each of these space objects, let me close my resource manager and keep my object info palette active there. There we go. So if I click on this space object, you can see that at the very bottom of the object info palette, there's a hexadecimal, rather lengthy hexadecimal string. And then there's a different one. So these all have different numbers associated with them. They're randomly generated, and those are just named so that each one is a unique number. And so when you export your model to IFC for sharing, for example, if you have an energy modeling consultant, you you definitely have to have space objects in there. And so if we go ahead and look at the settings for this one. Right, so for look at right, so there's some Energo settings. And so all of these, you know, kinds of zones and so forth, you would want to assign in order to properly export that as part of your IFC model. Now, some probably not an issue with interior doors, but if we just go to your door settings, I'm trying to find where this is. Might be under general. Yeah, so if you, on your doors, if you create a niche for space objects, then and in your space object itself, let me see, where did that go?
What would be the need to create that niche for a space object in a doorway?
Well, it's if there's just a slight change in volume. So that the space object, like if the window extends, you know, if the window is set in the wall and there's 3 or 4 inches of volume at the window, it would just add that volume to it. So that's the purpose of that. It's really useful for, or its use would be for energy calculations if you wanted to be highly accurate with that. I'm looking for that setting in the space object itself. I thought I saw it under 3D boundaries, but I'm not currently seeing it.
Did you look under advanced settings?
I did. Might be under space planning. Well, I lost it. Maybe somebody's. Ron's asking if anyone is having audio problems. Is anyone having audio problems?
No,
No.
No,
Oh, Ron, it's you. And then Bill, you said, how could you have a layer of individual room spaces and another for overall departments? Yeah, I would do that with classes, right? Because you're going to want the space to be in a layer that's associated with various walls and so forth.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions I can't answer for anyone?
I actually used it for site calculations, area site calculations, and when doing impervious cover and things like that, just as a quick way to sort of doing schematic design to move things around. I said, oh, Spaces seems to work, you know, it's not what it's designed for, but you could look at the area of a rectangle or any shape that you make, but Spaces does it automatically for you. So I thought that was kind of cool.
As a way of just displaying the surface area right there on the drawing as opposed to in a worksheet.
Right.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, for just residential impervious cover. Yeah. Good one, Bill.
I'm also using it, working at Zoning Commission Westlake, and we're coming up with a new concept of the ratio of buildable area within the setbacks to the overall site and the amount of area in the setbacks. So it was just very quick to do it that way. I didn't have a problem with the boundaries. I wasn't using walls, so it didn't matter.
Yeah. Harlan, it sounds like you've got some experience with space objects. Do you have any pointers or suggestions?
No, actually, I've learned everything from you here right now. I was just fiddling with it while we were talking, and it looked like we could, you know, reset your offset to whatever the baseboard dimension was, and it would work fine. So I thought I'd just bring that up.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. That would be the way to do it, because it, you know, some Vectorworks objects are they're class aware. So, for example, if you try to fit walls to objects on another layer, but the class that you want to fit to is turned off, it won't. The wall won't see it. It'll see it if the layer is turned off, but it won't see it if the class is turned off. But the space object is going to see that baseboard whether it's the class is on or off. So yeah, so that's a good point, that you could just build in an offset to the space object for greater accuracy. I guess the other thing that I would say is, you know, you kind of see this more in the energy modeling world, where people create virtual walls in order to imply boundaries when there's no physical wall that is literally bounding the space. So if you do use space objects and you want to be able to bind them to walls rather than drawing them manually, but you're in a situation like this one where the shell is on a different in a different file, essentially. You might want to just create a virtual wall style for yourself, you know, in a non-plot or an invisible class, and it could even have a thickness of 0 or nearly 0 if you had to assign it some thickness, so that you could create a boundary between spaces that you might consider to be two separate spaces, even though the walls would suggest that they're one. Right. So that's another little trick that you can use. Okay, well, thank you everyone, and you know, shoot me an email or reach out, whatever, and otherwise I will see everybody in April.
Thank you.
Thanks, Francois.
Thanks.
Bye,
Thank you,
everybody.
Francois.
Have a good trip.
Bye-bye. All right. Bye-bye.